full picture of who Jesus really is. And things are coming to a head in Mark 12, where we're going to be this morning. So we're going to look at three things as we walk through Mark 12: who he is, who we are, and an unimaginable promise. So I want to give you a little Bible history before we get started. They didn't always have the numbers in the Bible when they wrote it. I am not sure what the guy was smoking when he numbered it, because some of these make zero sense. So 12 actually should start back at the end of 11. That may mean nothing to you, but this guy, supposedly, true story, I think they said he was on horseback as he numbered some of this, so maybe the bumps got him. So we're actually going to start in Mark 11, 27 to 33. 27 to 33. They came again to Jerusalem. As he was walking in the temple, the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders came and asked him, "By what authority are you doing these things? Who gave you this authority to do what you're doing?" Jesus said to them, "I'll ask you one question, then answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Was John's baptism from heaven or of human origin? Answer me." They discussed it among themselves, and they said, "If we say from heaven, he will say, then why didn't you believe me? But if we say of human origin," they were afraid of the crowd because everyone thought that John was truly a prophet. So they kind of got done huddling, and they answered Jesus, "We don't know." And Jesus said to them, "Then neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things." So here's why this makes sense, picking up the story here to start verse 12. Last week we saw that Jesus had entered town in this dramatic fashion. The people are in a frenzy. They thought surely the next military king has come in. He's going to kick the Romans out. And we saw that he just leaves town, round up blasts a fig tree on his way out, and then he leaves town. He has shut down temple activity, 250,000 people. And one pastor says this. He's in New York, the pastor, so he's got this good grasp on like Macy's and like all of this stuff. And he says this. He said, Jesus has just done the equivalent of going to Macy's on Black Friday morning, turning over all the displays, all the tables and the cash registers, yelling, "Don't shop here, Macy's is corrupt." Now Jesus has walked back in the day after, and people are wondering, what on earth is this guy doing? Who does this guy think he is? You see, it was okay for Jesus to kind of be out in the country, kind of leading this band of merry men. All right, picture like it's okay for Jesus to have caused a stir in Pickens, right? If you're from Pickens, it's a beautiful place. I'm not knocking Pickens. I'm just saying it's not downtown Greenville, okay? So Jesus, it was okay as long as he was out in Pickens, all right, causing a little bit of a commotion. But now he's brought it downtown. Now he's in the city center. If this was still the Macy's example, you got a picture, all of corporate has flown down from New York, and they're asking this guy, "Who do you think you are flipping over all the cash registers in this place?" And who's come to him? It says the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. These guys were the power players in Israel. This was like the equivalent of the Senate, the House, the president, and the entire Supreme Court converging in one power group. This is 71 men, and they held all the power. You got to picture 71 guys walking to you, and 250,000 people like backing off, being like, "Holy cow, now you've done it." Now these guys are here. And here they come. Because Jesus has thrown down the gauntlet, and these guys say, "We'll pick it up." See, one picture that Mark wants us to see of the real Jesus is that he is not scared or weak. He has come for a fight to take back all that is his. I don't know what picture of Jesus you carry in here. None of us are neutral. No one carries in this blank canvas like, I don't have an image of what Jesus is. So many of us have a preconceived notion. Maybe he's just this big mean referee in the sky, the fun police. Maybe he's just this all love is love, Jesus, docile. That was kind of my version of it. You know, Lutheran school, blonde hair, blue-eyed Jesus with the sheep on his shoulder. Very inaccurate. Very inaccurate. And see, I thought that Jesus had no power in my life. Jesus Christ, the real Jesus, has come to wage war on sin and death, but he's also come to wage war on dead religion and the very activities that keep people from him. Aren't there things that we've experienced with church? It's one of the reasons that Morgan and I had such a passion to do what we do, because we have experienced church hurt. How many people in this room have experienced this disappointment or church disappointment or pastoral disappointment? Just church hurt. Don't we bring this stuff in here? And the real Jesus in love is confronting all of our misconceptions to say, no, this is who I am. And he does it in incredible ways. In all four of the gospel books, that's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Jesus is asked 183 questions. 183 times Jesus is asked questions, and if you notice, in all but 3 of those, he responds with a question. 180 times Jesus says, no, I'm going to ask you something. He's not evasive. This was a very common technique in Greek and Roman debate, and Jesus is using it to be surgical at exposing the heart of us all. Jesus wants to expose our wants, our hopes, our fears, and our deepest motives. He wants us to see why we do what we do, to tear it down and show us there's a much better way to do life. Jesus asked questions to get to the core of people, and that's what Mark wanted his readers to do with this Jesus. You see, he will answer who he is, and he will expose our idols in doing it. You see, he goes to John. John told them one would come who was greater than him. Remember back to Mark 1. It says this in verse 4, John came baptizing in the wilderness, proclaiming a baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of sins. The whole Judean Christian side and all of people of Jerusalem were going out to him. That is the 250,000 people that are now in the midst of this Macy's Black Friday fiasco. And John said, one who is more powerful than me is coming after me. I am not worthy to stoop down and untie his sandals. Jesus is saying, crown me or kill me. Because I'm telling you that I'm the one that John talked about. Now these 71 men are in an awful spot. See, the 71 men can hear the crowd saying, watch your mouth, don't talk bad about John. Don't say anything bad about John. They loved John. Remember in Mark 1, it says the whole Judean countryside, all of Jerusalem was going out. They loved John. And he says, did John's baptism come from heaven or earth? And he's just using baptism to summarize all of what John the Baptist did. You know, the locusts, eating locusts, wearing these fur coats and all this strange stuff out in the desert. And he's just using baptism to John's baptism as a way of saying, John's whole ministry, where did it come from? I mean, we know this about John. What's his name? John the Baptist. Baptism was pretty important to John's whole thing. See, the people loved John, and they knew he was a prophet. So here's the question Mark puts to us. Is he or isn't he the one greater that John talked about? We have to wrestle with that and answer it. Is he who Paul says in Romans 11, for from him, through him, and to him are all things, to him be glory forever. Amen. Paul says all things. Is he king of your life, or are you looking for someone else? Is he king, or is someone else sit on the throne of your heart and your life? There's this fun thing that happens for me when I'm preparing a text. It always works on me first. It always hits me. It always confronts me and crushes me. And I hate sitting alone in that, so I'm here to pass that on to you. Because I had to write this down and think on it all week. And I encourage you to do the same, to write down, who is Jesus to me? Who is Jesus to me? And how does the real Jesus confront my life? You're welcome. Mark is showing page after page that the life that you long for is only found when this Jesus is on the throne of your life. Don't we know we need a hero to our story? I say it so often, no one sitting here says, man, this thing's gone exactly how I thought it would. Haven't we all been through enough life to know that things aren't how they're supposed to be, and we need someone bigger than us to take up the mantle, to fight in our place, to work, and to hold on to this promise that, man, someday everything sad will start to work backwards. Sin in a broken world is relentless, and I want you to see the real Jesus, that even sin and death are not as relentless to get you home as Jesus Christ is. It hit me this week. I always longed for someone to fight for me. I always longed for someone to stand up to the difficulties that I faced. I say before, and I shock people when I say I used to get bullied a lot. My body was getting prepared to hit a growth spurt, if you haven't noticed. So my body was packing on a few pounds in early adolescence, and I was made fun of really bad. I always tell people at one point these kids invited me to a swim party. My mom drives me. I knock on the door, no one answers. I get home, they'd given me the address across the street just to see me show up in my swim clothes. I hit a growth spurt. They didn't do that anymore. They apologized. We're sorry, man. But yeah, I got bullied, and I always longed for somebody to stand up for me. And the only version of Christianity I saw, I had a youth pastor tell me, well, what you really need to do, I know you're scared to go to school, but you really just need to pray and accept Jesus into your heart. And I'm, bro, I get the I'm a sinner thing, I think. You've made me feel awful about myself. I'm still terrified to go to school because I think this farmer who's just always dipping in class is going to pummel me. I had no reason to think that Jesus cared about my life. What does this version of Jesus that I've been shown have to do with anything? And the real Jesus is standing here saying, I have come to fight for you. You realize in the midst of the most powerful men in the world, he stood alone. Why? For you. I remembered all of these things preparing this sermon. I remember the little kid I was at my grandpa's funeral. I remember the hurting adult I was when I got a phone call about my cousin. I remember the sin and shattering choices I've made to other people. Who is big enough? Who is willing to fight the fight that I never could in the midst of those moments? And the real Jesus is standing here in front of the most 71 powerful men in the world, and he says, I am fighting for you. Tell me that doesn't shake up whatever picture of Jesus you've brought in here this morning. He is alone, he is surrounded, and yet he stands because the real Jesus came for a fight. And he knew that it would lead to his lonely death. And here is your king, unafraid to wage war on what has haunted you, what scares you, what has made you cry, what has made you long for something more. The real Jesus came for a fight. And it shows their heart and ours too that they cannot answer, and that we have a hard time answering the question ourselves. Is this real Jesus the one that I crown king of my life? You see, because their little kingdom was all they lived for. They only cared about the power that these 250,000 people had given them. That is what they poured all of their life into. They only cared about what these other people could do for them. You see, these guys knew every promise of the one to come from the Old Testament. Realize this, if you've ever sat in Awana, if you come from that Southern Baptist tradition, you've sat in a Awana class, and you feel like you're failing because you can't remember like the 17 Bible verses they told you to go home so you get a patch on your vest. Those vests were terrible. Oh my gosh. Andrew, did you have a vest?
I did.
Yeah, you did. Still got Realize this, these guys would have had every patch on their vest. They would memorize Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. They would memorize Numbers. How about that one? Give that one a glance on your way home. They knew everything in the Old Testament. You see, in this moment, they should be in awe and wonder that, oh my goodness, the one I have read about is here. Yet all they can do is cling to their own little kingdom. But what will you answer to the same question? Who is the real Jesus? And is this Jesus king on the throne of your life, or is someone else? And when we answer with a rejection of this king, the world shatters. And spoiler alert, we do it all the time. And it shows who we are, and that's what it leads into when we finally hit what this guy on horseback labeled Mark 12. Mark 12, 1 to 12, he began to speak to them in parables A man planted a vineyard, put a fence around it, and dug a pit for a wine press, and built a watchtower. He's saying that this man, this father, built everything they could ever need: protection, provision. They'd never have to leave the vineyard that he'd created. They've even got a wine press. They don't ever have to leave. Then he leased it to some tenants, and he went away. At harvest time, he sent a servant to the farmers to collect some of the fruit from the vineyard. But they took him, beat him, and sent him away empty-handed. Again, he sent another servant to them, and they hit him on the head and treated him shamefully. Then he sent yet another, and they killed that one. He also sent many others. Some they beat, others they killed. And he still had one to send, a beloved son. Finally, he sent his son to them, saying, "They will surely respect my son." But those tenant farmers said to one another, "This is his heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance will be ours." So they seized the son, they killed him, and threw him out of the vineyard. And Jesus asked them, "What then will the owner of the vineyard do?" "I will tell you, he will come and kill the farmers and give the vineyard to others. Haven't you read the scriptures? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. And this came about from the Lord and is wonderful in their eyes." They were looking for a way to arrest him, but feared the crowd, because they knew he had spoken this parable about them. Weird stuff hits me when I prepare, and for some reason I thought of like these business encounters where you do the compliment sandwich. You know, when you bring somebody in, you're going to like critique them. Jesus could care less at this point. He is here for a fight. But for some reason I came up with a compliment sandwich that Jesus would have given these people. So this has nothing to do with what we're going to get into, but this is my compliment sandwich that I think Jesus would have given them. You're doing a great job marketing the Passover. You are the most rebellious generation in history, deserving of complete destruction. But the doves are organic and non-GMO that you're selling at the Passover. So in the midst of it, Jesus could care less. He is here for an absolute fight, and he has gone straight at them. He is here for war on what keeps people from him. He still is today. These things that you think you come in here with, and you think, I haven't done this, so surely these people say that I've got to do these things in my life, or else I'm not going to fit in at church, or I've got to dress a certain way, or I've got to not have tattoos. I've got to do these things, or else I'm not welcome in the family of God. Jesus is saying, whatever it is that has kept you from me, I've come to wage war on the people that have done it. And he's looking at these 71 men, and he's saying, I hold you guilty for all of time, what you have done to keep people from me. He is kicking these people in the face and could care less. You see, all through the Old Testament, God compared Israel to his vineyard. And he was going straight at them because they loved Isaiah, and they would have known Isaiah 5:1-7. So imagine this parable that Jesus just told. Now listen to Isaiah 5:1-7, especially 1-5. Listen to the comparison. Jesus is pulling this and saying, you are these people. Isaiah 5:1, I will sing about the one I love, a song about my loved one's vineyard. The one I love had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. He broke up the soil, he cleared it of the stones, and planted it with the finest vines. He built a tower in the middle of it, and even dug out a winepress. Is this not? He's quoting the exact same thing. I expected it to yield good grapes, but it yielded worthless grapes. So now, residents of Jerusalem and men of Judah, please judge with me and my vineyard. What more could I have done for the vineyard than what I did? Why, when I expected a yield of good grapes, did it yield worthless grapes? Now I will tell you what I'm about to do to my vineyard. What do you think he says? He says, I'm going to absolutely crush and destroy these people. And why does God say in Isaiah the vineyard failed to do a thing? Because Isaiah condemned Israel's leaders. There is a judgment that awaits leaders of the church that say, do this or you're not welcome. Do this or you're not welcome. Follow these rules or you're not in. Worship this way or you're not in. There is a condemnation that rests on people that keep others from God. The king has come, and it is time for him to take back what is his. That is really good news for us today. Do you see why they hated him? You see, Jesus is standing there saying, I am God, and guess what? I am judge and jury, and you are guilty, and the time has come for you to pay the price. All that he left to those who should have loved him have left it desolate. That is us. He has given us so many good things. We split half a cow, a whole cow. We split half of it, packed our freezers. Every time I enjoy a steak from that beautiful animal, I am so thankful to God that He gave me the taste buds to enjoy it. He gave us seasonings. He gave us all of these things. When you enjoy a good glass of wine, when you sit there and you have these things, you were supposed to be like, oh my gosh, look at what He's given us. When you enjoy a good time with friends, when you go and you enjoy the stuff that He's made, He is saying, I've given this to you. Use it for me. Enjoy it. Give me praise and thanks. Every time we don't, we spit in His face. And there are people He holds accountable, and it is the leaders of God's people that don't sit there and say, man, come to Him, come to Him, come to Him. I have sat in sermons and listened to the most ridiculous stuff that made me feel like absolute garbage. I sat in front of a whole sermon, an hour long. This guy went hard, and the whole sermon was about how you should never say that Jesus turned water into wine, that it was grape juice. An hour. I'm like, no, the Greek, there's wine. It was wine. It's okay. And this was a whole group of people that were in rehab. We had to go sit in this. I'm like, bro, you don't know who you're talking to. We're train wrecks, man. You think wine's our biggest problem? Are you serious? I mean, go look in my truck. There's a lot worse sitting in that thing right now. And there are churches that tell you you are not welcome if you have a drink. I was asked to teach somewhere, to fill in for a pastor, and they said, one more thing, make sure you wear long sleeves because they will not listen to you if you have tattoos on your arm. So, well, my mother-in-law loves them, so I don't really care what you think. These guys would have known the Old Testament. My mother-in-law hates them. These guys would have known. They would have known that from the beginning, God had sent the prophets to tell Israel, turn back to me, turn back to me, turn back to me. Luke 11:50-51, you have to insert this into what Jesus is saying because Luke is recording another dimension of this. Luke 11:50-51, Jesus goes directly at them so that this generation, the same example when He's talking to these leaders, may be held responsible for the blood of all the prophets shed since the foundation of the world. From the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah who perished between the altar and the sanctuary. What Jesus is saying is, from day one until today, you are guilty. Everyone that I have sent to say, turn back to me, turn back to me, turn back to me, I love you, there's a better way to do life. You have killed them. You have beat them. See, the Jewish Old Testament is lined up different than ours. Abel happened in Genesis. The Jewish Old Testament ends with 2 Chronicles. Zechariah is killed at the end of 2 Chronicles. Jesus is saying from bookend to bookend, this is your heart, and today you have to pay. So He sent His beloved Son, the parable says, and they murdered Him to make their own kingdom great. And in foreshadowing His own death, it says they sent the body of the beloved Son outside the gates. They wouldn't even crucify Jesus in town. They crucified Him outside the gates. Jesus is saying, this is what you're about to do. You see, if we tell God enough in our life, we do not want Him Lord, He will say to you at some point, your will be done. If you tell Him, I want another king, I want another king, I want another king, at some point He will say, okay. And He doesn't do it because He's this fun police in the sky. He does it because He wants you to see that whatever you chase after instead of Him is going to lead to futility. We place so much weight on relationships now, but this consumer relationship dynamic where people just exist to make me happy. I should just give and give of myself because if I don't have this relationship, then surely my life won't matter. Surely if I do this in a way that the world says to do it, then I'll be happy, because surely the fun police in the sky has no idea what he meant when he created sex and marriage and all these good things. Surely the one that created it has no clue how to enjoy it best. Don't we do this? We put the weight of the good life on finding the one. Find the one. Then you find out the one can't do dairy and snores. And if he eats too much pizza at his friend's house last night, he's up all night with heartburn. Yeah, next time you're at a funeral, seriously, look at that person, the one, and sit there and say, yeah, this is who I've placed the hope of my salvation upon. This is who I hope is going to be there for me. This is the one I hope is big enough to conquer this when it comes to my door. Jesus is saying, I love you so stinking much. Come to me. I'm going to show you how to enjoy the good gifts that I've given you. I've given you everything you need. I've told you I'll protect you. That's why he says, he quotes Psalm 118. Do you see Jesus is just rattling off the very stuff that these people know? Psalm 118, 22 to 23, he says, the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. What is a cornerstone? It was the most expensive stone. It was the first laid stone, and it was to ensure that the building is square and stable. Jesus is saying anything you try to put the weight of the human experience on other than me will crumble. And I love you enough to say, man, build your life on me. In the face of it costing him his own life, he is still pleading with us not to destroy ourselves. And the insanity of sin is that we hate anyone who tells us otherwise. We hate it. We cancel them. You want to get canceled? Just sit there and tell somebody, man, I really think that you're missing it here. I really want you to flourish. Look for the good life here, because this is how God designed it. Tell somebody that, and boom, cancel. We don't put up with it, because we are just like these 71 men, and we want to build our lives on what we think makes our kingdom great. And the question that Mark puts in front of us is, what have you placed the weight of your meaning and hope and peace and joy in? What have you placed finding the good life in? Because Jesus is standing there fighting sin and death and the universe, saying, I have come to show you, man, you can find it in me. A good tenant of a vineyard knows this. None of the farm is theirs. And they know that they will only flourish if they work under the rule of this incredible, amazing king who has given them all of it. A good tenant knows that it is the king that has just put everything on loan. We should see all we have been given to us is on loan. And then we should work to sow back in all that we have into this incredible kingdom of this cornerstone, so that we know the abundant life and bring others to it. We work the gospel into every area of our lives, so that there is no part of my life where I look and say, you are king here, but I will not make you king here. I will make you king of X, but I will not make you king of Y. We should look and say, everything he has given me, he's given me on loan, and I'm called to be a good steward of it. Not because he's this angry landlord, but because he's saying, man, I want you to do well. I want you to know joy. I want you to know peace. I want you to know that the good life is found in me. And that's why gathering together is so stinking important, because we're a community of people that say, I agree, man. I see that you're needing it in this area of your life, man. Get after it. That we spur each other on, that we say, man, I know marriage is difficult. I know dating is difficult. I know parenting is difficult. Hang in there. Let me help. I know you need community. Find it here. When we reject the rule of the king in any area of our life, we are no different than the vineyard Jesus warns about. I couldn't come up with a compliment sandwich here, so all I've got is good news and bad news. Bad news. We do this all the time in our life, and we mess it up. Good news. Though it deserves absolute destruction, he has done the unthinkable. You see, the father and the son of the vineyard are not helpless victims, but they are co-conspirators. They are orchestrating through the atrocity of the Son's death to take the punishment we deserve so that we may be forgiven of our treason. That is the gospel. Can you imagine? That is what sets Christianity apart from any other worldview, any other religion. No one would ever dare to do this. Who would work the most atrocious event in human history? God was murdered. That's pretty bad. I would hold that up there. Bad. Can we agree? Pretty bad. And yet he wasn't an innocent, helpless. He was innocent of all sin, but he wasn't this helpless person who was just thrown into it. And he's like, dude, what's going on? He said, I have known this. That's why the Bible says he was the lamb that was slain before the foundations of the world. God knew he would destroy his good and perfect vineyard. And he said, I will come, take the punishment you deserve to make it what it was always meant to be. What on earth kind of salvation is that? That's why the last thing we see is an unimaginable promise. You see, there's another story that Jesus tells of a land-owning father. It's in Luke 15. Jesus tells the parable of the prodigal son. Prodigal means to recklessly give away. So think of this. It is a story we don't even expect because it is really the story of a prodigal God. Some translations of the Bible in German actually call this not the parable of the prodigal son. They call it the parable of the prodigal God. That was in a commentary. I don't read German. This is about the reckless giving away of God. This father is taken advantage of and told he is worth more dead to the son in this story than he is alive. With his father as king, he had all he could ever dream of. But he wanted to be king, and in treason to the king, his father, he takes his inheritance and leaves. Only wreckage and regret ensue. The son is descended into darkness and sits there in the midst of the worst times of his life and remembers how good it was with his dad. And he longs to be back home, but there is no way to come home. How could he ever clean up this mess that he's in? How could he ever make things right in himself? He just wants it to be how it used to be. But what he doesn't know is the love of his dad. Every day the dad would walk out by himself and look onto the horizon, hoping his son, his baby boy, would come running home. Where there was no way for this rebel, the father was ready to pay any price to get his son home, and it would cost him everything. One day he walks out and he sees his son on the horizon. See, the son is left alone to walk all the way through town to take all of the shame, all of the regret, all the mocking, all the looking, all of the stench that he carried with him from living with pigs, eating the pigs' food, something that no Jew would have ever done. The son is left on his own to stand outside of town and wonder, how on earth can I ever get back to my dad? And the father, it says, lifted his robe and ran through town for him. Scandal. No father of standing in Jewish culture would ever lift his robe to run. He is saying, I will take every ounce of shame my son deserves on myself. He ran through town so that he could walk through with his son and take every bit of mocking and shame on himself. He took the filth on himself, gave up his position of honor to everyone who looked on, and absorbed the financial wreck of his son. Why? Because he stinking loved him that much. Because it was his little boy. Because he remembered how good it was when his little boy would sit on his lap and he would wrestle with him. He remembered those days when it was just good to be with his son. He remembered what it was to be like dad to that little boy. When that little boy looked at dad and thought, this guy is Superman, he can do no wrong. The father said, I love that kid so much, I don't care what you've done. You can come home, and not only that, I'll do whatever it takes to get you there. Because once upon a time, the son was his, and all was as it was supposed to be, and the father will do anything to get it back. You see the picture Jesus is painting. And he's telling these men, you don't get it. But I'm not defeated. You don't want it? I'm giving it to the Gentiles. You don't want it? I'm going to give it to those that have never followed the rules, that don't know anything about church, they don't have Andrew's Awana vest. I'm going to give it to people that have no clue even where to find the book of Mark, but they love me, they want to worship me, they know what they've done, they've repented and believed. I'm giving it to them. And that is really good news because we are all Gentiles. Didn't think you'd be called names this morning. Unless you're Jewish, in which case, shalom, welcome. This Jesus is who he says he is. He is the Messiah. And he has given it to us. That is the church. And what he's saying is that we are called to work in your life whatever it takes to put back into the vineyard of his kingdom, whatever it takes. That's why we rehearse the things we rehearse. That's why we're going to do communion today, because it is a tangible act of working back into my life. My gosh, remember the gospel. It's the way I treat everything. I work back everything because it's only on loan to me from the good Father back into the kingdom. Everything I have, all of my time, my home, my relationships, my money, every single thing I have, I am called to be told, this is on loan, man. Give it up. Run after me with all you've got. That's what Jesus is calling us to do. To work into your life the lordship of the prodigal king who gave it all for you to get you home. Let me pray. Lord, absolute reckless love that you have shown to us. That we don't look back as outsiders simply watching this drama unfold, but we are active participants in it in the way that we choose to either crown you or kill you. That we are called to make you king because it's what you deserve. And thank you that your lordship is not dependent on our behavior. That you are king no matter what. And nothing changes your posture and your disposition toward us, and it is only love. You know nothing but love for your children. And you were just telling us to come home. Thank you for this group of people that we are gathered here with, that not just today we don't just see each other, but on a Tuesday or on a Wednesday or over a cup of coffee or over a round of golf or whatever it is you put in front of us, that we get to connect and just see each other doing life and spur each other on. That you have called people together to be a light to the world around us so that they look at the way we use our time, that we work the lordship of your kingdom into our lives and they say, man, I want that. How do I get that? And they know they're not alone in chasing after you. Lord, I thank you that we get to remember you through communion, that we get to have a tangible representation of what you've done, and we can remember that you are the prodigal God. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.